Elias Varick cursed under his breath as another plasma round sizzled past, embedding itself into the scorched ground with a hiss that smelled faintly of burnt circuitry and bad decisions. The war on Zephyria wasn't supposed to feel like this. The official briefings had called it a tactical engagement, a word that made it sound more like a board game than the nightmarish firestorm of plasma storms, collapsing infrastructure, and half-sentient war drones that chased him like angry, hovering mosquitoes. He glanced at his boots, scuffed and smeared with alien mud that had a suspiciously sweet smell, and muttered, "Yeah, tactical. Totally." Above him, the sky pulsed with streaks of iridescent lightning, arcs of pure energy slicing through the crimson clouds, reflecting off the jagged spires of ruined buildings. Elias squinted, trying to see where the next ambush might come from, though he suspected that the war itself had a personal vendetta against him. Every corner of the ruined city whispered threats, from the broken machinery to the shifting shadows of mechanized patrols. He kicked over a half-dismembered drone, sending it spinning like a top, and quipped, "Not today, you glorified Roomba." Then he saw her, Lysera, trapped beneath a twisted girder, one arm pressed against a mangled control console, her long ears folded awkwardly over her head. She looked human at first glance, graceful, pale skin with an almost metallic sheen under the stormlight. But those ears, impossibly long and delicate, twitched faintly as she struggled to lift herself. Her eyes, a luminous shade of green that seemed to glow even in the shadow of ruin, met his. And in that instant, Elias felt an unfamiliar knot of responsibility tighten in his chest. Not heroism exactly. He'd seen enough corpses to know that heroism was optional, but something dangerously close to it. Need a hand, or are you planning to audition for the world's most dramatic limbo? He called, already kicking off into the debris. His voice cracked against the chaos, but it was enough to get her attention. She raised one eyebrow, a long, pointed arch that somehow made her look simultaneously annoyed and amused. "I was about to try for the limbo, actually. But your timing is acceptable," she replied, her voice a mixture of musical cadence and dry humor, which made Elias grin despite the taste of ash in his mouth. He crouched beside her, jamming a plasma rod into the warped metal, levering it like a crowbar. Sparks danced and hissed, and Elias swore again as his gloves melted slightly under the heat. Lysera, instead of panicking, made little quips about how human craftsmanship was remarkably flammable. He ignored that, mostly because she was right, and mostly because he had learned a long time ago that arguing with sarcastic aliens was as futile as arguing with malfunctioning gravity generators. Finally, with a groan that sounded suspiciously like the city itself protesting, the girder shifted enough for her to roll free. She stumbled, but Elias caught her by the waist just in time, feeling the strange weight of her in his arms, lighter than he expected, yet curiously firm. "Thanks," she said, brushing ash and grime from her uniform. Her ears twitched again, and he half expected them to start vibrating like radar. "Yeah, well, don't make a habit of it. I'm not exactly running a delivery service for trapped aliens," he muttered. His voice was gruff, but there was an odd warmth to it that even he couldn't ignore. Lysera smirked, though, and for a moment the horrors of the battlefield seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was giving him a brief reprieve to appreciate that sarcasm could be universal. "Delivery service, you say?" she teased. "Perhaps you should update your resume to include savior of the dramatically overreared." Elias snorted, shaking his head, and led her toward a safer street, dodging another volley of energy blasts. "Yeah, because that'll look great on a LinkedIn profile. Skilled in explosive urban rescue and alien ear management." They moved cautiously through the wreckage, stepping over broken hovercars and the skeletal remains of automated sentries that had clearly decided to quit mid-battle. Every so often, Elias muttered under his breath about the absurdity of war, noting how even the plasma storms seemed to have a flair for dramatics, striking with choreographed precision that made him feel like a reluctant extra in someone else's interstellar ballet. Lysera occasionally flinched at near misses, but she never let her fear dominate her movements. Her eyes flicked constantly, analyzing, calculating, noting escape routes, obstacles, and the occasional opportunity for a sarcastic comment. As they rounded a collapsed overpass, a patrol drone hovered in the shadows, scanning for movement. Elias ducked instinctively, dragging Lysera behind a half-collapsed support pillar. She whispered, "You know, for a human, you're remarkably good at not dying," and he gave her a mock glare. "Thanks, I practice daily. Mostly failing, but hey, today counts." She chuckled softly, a musical sound that seemed out of place amidst the ruin but somehow fitting. Using a combination of stealth, luck, and sheer improvisation, they navigated through the ruins. Elias kicked a loose panel into the drone's path. It collided, sparks flying, and the drone reeled in confusion long enough for them to escape. See, human ingenuity. He crowed, puffing out his chest like a particularly sarcastic hero. Lysera rolled her eyes, and for the first time, Elias noticed the faintest twitch of amusement in her long ears. It was subtle, but he filed it away mentally, the way a soldier notes terrain for later use. Finally, they reached a partially intact sanctuary, the remnants of a cellulari structure with walls that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. The effect was gentle and calming, a sharp contrast to the chaos outside. Elias guided her inside and leaned against a wall, catching his breath. Lysera sank to the floor, her injuries evident now that the immediate danger had passed. She looked up at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You really are hopelessly dramatic, aren't you?" she said, voice tinged with amusement. "And you're annoyingly competent for someone I just saved from certain doom," he shot back, which earned him a chuckle from her. They sat in relative silence for a moment, the hum of alien energy filling the room. Elias tended to her wounds, fumbling with bandages and muttering apologies when his fingers slipped. Lysera teased him the entire time, critiquing his human technique with dry wit. "You do know we have medikits for a reason, yes?" "Yeah, well, I prefer the personal touch. Adds flair," he said, and she laughed, the sound echoing gently through the bioluminescent sanctuary. In that strange, luminous calm, a bond began to form, fragile but undeniable, rooted in survival, laced with humor, and threaded with a shared understanding that the war outside was merciless. But perhaps together they could navigate it with a little less misery and a little more laughter. Elias glanced at her, noticing the way her long ears twitched in time with her breathing, the way her luminous green eyes reflected both fatigue and determination. "Don't get used to me saving you," he said, voice quieter now, almost lost in the hum of the sanctuary. Lysera tilted her head, studying him with that same mix of amusement and curiosity. "Oh, I wasn't planning to, but perhaps I might enjoy your company for a while." Elias blinked, caught between surprise, confusion, and the faintest stirrings of something unfamiliar. "Company? You mean like coffee?" She smirked, her ears flicking in a way that seemed almost mischievous. "Something like that, Captain Varric. Something like that." Outside, the storm continued to rage, indifferent to human plans, but inside that sanctuary, with sparks of humor cutting through the remnants of war, an improbable alliance had been forged, one that might very well alter the course of the galaxy, or at the very least, their own fates. Elias woke to the faint hum of the sanctuary's energy conduits, the soft pulse of bioluminescent walls casting shifting shadows across the room. Lysera was already awake, sitting cross-legged near a damaged medbay console, her long ears perked like antennae as she analyzed the faint readouts. "Morning, Captain Varric," she said, voice smooth but edged with amusement. "You slept surprisingly well, considering the near-death experience and your questionable bedside manners." Questionable bedside manners. That's rich coming from someone who made jokes while dangling upside down over a plasma storm. Elias muttered, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and trying not to think about how exhausted he really felt. He swung his legs off the bunk and nearly slipped on a slick patch of alien residue. Also, your ears are judging me. I can feel it. They are, she said simply, tilting her head. The way her ears twitched made him wonder if they were reading his thoughts or plotting how to strangle him if he annoyed her too much. Elias snorted, grabbing his gear. Good. At least one part of me is getting honest feedback. They left the sanctuary cautiously, stepping into the still turbulent streets of Zephyria. Smoke curled in multicolored ribbons through the air, reflecting the neon blasts of failed defense systems. Elias had taken to leading with dramatic flair, ducking behind debris, gesturing wildly, and occasionally yelling at rogue warbeasts that seemed more offended by his existence than threatened. Lysera followed with practiced grace, hopping over broken crates and giving him occasional commentary. Your aim is inconsistent, she said, nodding toward the smoldering remains of a drone he had just attempted to disable. I prefer to call it creative improvisation, Elias shot back, spinning on one heel and narrowly avoiding an energy blast. You'll thank me when you see my style in action. Lysera's smirk was brief, but she quipped, if by action you mean creating collateral damage and panicking your companion, then yes, it is impressive. Their path led them to a derelict orbital station, hovering like a wounded sentinel above Zephyria. The station's outer hull was scarred, panels peeling like old skin, and inside gravity fluctuated in odd pockets, sending floating debris and Elias himself into occasional, clumsy collisions. I hate zero-G, he muttered, pushing off a wall only to ricochet into a crate. Lysera floated elegantly, her long ears trailing behind her like banners. You humans are remarkably ungraceful when untethered from solid surfaces, she commented, clearly enjoying his struggle. Elias coughed, disentangling himself and muttering, remarkably ungraceful. That's your professional critique. Inside the station, they discovered a series of holographic logs left by the Celyari command. Lysera's eyes flickered, scanning them rapidly. I wasn't just a strategist. I coordinated entire evacuation maneuvers and defense perimeters. They thought I was expendable, she said quietly, a shadow crossing her face. Elias frowned. Expendable, he asked. She glanced at him, her lips twitching into a faint, ironic smile. Apparently, in interstellar war, sarcasm doesn't save you either, she said. Elias blinked. You're telling me your survival skill includes both tactical brilliance and roasting people. She raised one eyebrow. Survival and morale management, and apparently rescuing clumsy humans. The juxtaposition of danger and humor became a pattern as they explored further. A malfunctioning security droid activated in their path, extending a dozen metallic arms like a chaotic spider. Elias yelped and rolled behind a console, narrowly avoiding a lashing arm. Lysera sighed, floating up with effortless poise, and with a flick of her wrist, sent a pulse that short-circuited the droid. See. Elegance and precision, she said, landing lightly. Elias groaned, brushing ash off his jacket. I'm going to need a week to recover from just watching you do that. As they ventured deeper, gravity pockets continued to challenge them. Elias inadvertently floated into a pool of zero-gravity coolant, his limbs flailing like a newborn in a fountain. Lysera hovered nearby, stifling a laugh, and quipped, humans. The only species that can make falling look awkward even without gravity. Elias sputtered, kicking at the air. I'm testing aerodynamics. Yeah, that's it, aerodynamics. Despite the humor and chaos, a quiet intimacy began to grow between them. Elias learned to read the subtle shifts of her long ears, the flick that indicated amusement, the slight droop that hinted at concern. Lysera noticed his protective instincts, the way he subtly positioned himself between danger and her, even when she protested that she could handle herself. Their journey eventually led them to a vast observation deck, overlooking the shattered surface of Zephyria. The twin suns cast elongated shadows across the ruin, and distant plasma storms painted the horizon with violent streaks of light. Lysera stepped forward, ears twitching slightly, and said, "The galaxy doesn't care about our survival, yet here we are, still standing." Elias leaned against the railing, trying to appear casual while secretly feeling the weight of her observation. "Yeah, well, survival is more fun with company," he said, glancing at her. She gave him a look that was half amusement, half calculation. "You humans do have odd ways of expressing appreciation," she said. He shrugged, managing a crooked grin. "Odd but effective, I think." As the day progressed, they navigated corridors of flickering lights, reactivated defunct turrets to cover their path, and avoided semi-sentient repair bots that insisted on cataloging them as unauthorized intruders. Humor became their lifeline. Elias would occasionally mimic the bots, robotic monotone to make Lysera laugh, and she would retort with exaggerated warnings about his human clumsiness contaminating alien systems. Each laugh was a tiny victory against the oppressive backdrop of war, a reminder that survival wasn't just about avoiding death. It was about keeping a sense of self intact amidst the chaos. At one point, they discovered a cargo bay filled with pods of alien flora designed to filter toxic air. Elias, ever the improviser, jokingly attempted to taste a glowing blue leaf. Lysera's eyes widened. "Do not eat that." "Do not," she warned, long ears flicking sharply. Elias paused, leaf halfway to his mouth. "I was inspecting it for quality. Yeah, quality control." She rolled her eyes, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Your kind never ceases to baffle." The final segment of their exploration brought them to a chamber where they could rest more safely. Elias set up a makeshift cot while Lysera examined the room, her fingers tracing alien inscriptions. "You know, human, if you survive this war without accidentally electrocuting yourself or causing a minor structural collapse, it will be a miracle worthy of song," she said. Elias smirked, tossing a spare blanket at her. "Then consider me a walking, sarcastic miracle." As they settled in, a quiet tension hung in the air, a mixture of fatigue and the unspoken understanding that their bond had deepened. They had laughed, fought, and survived together, discovering each other's strengths and weaknesses. Elias caught himself studying her, long ears flicking as she adjusted her position, eyes glinting with intelligence and humor. It was strange, disorienting even, to feel a sense of connection with someone who wasn't human, yet entirely natural in its own way. Lysera finally spoke, her voice softer than before. "You know, Elias, for someone so clumsy, you make a compelling companion." He blinked, caught off guard. "Clumsy? I thought I was heroic." "You are," she said, amusement creeping back into her tone. "But your heroism is occasionally chaotic. Endearingly chaotic." Elias laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "I'll take that as a compliment, I think." Outside, the orbital station groaned as distant shocks reverberated through its hull, a reminder that the galaxy was still unforgiving. Inside, however, the improbable pair found a measure of comfort, humor, and mutual respect, a fragile alliance formed amidst the detritus of war. Each joke, each sarcastic exchange, was a small rebellion against the destruction surrounding them, a testament to survival not just of body, but of spirit. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Elias realized that this mission was no longer just about escaping death. It was about understanding her, the alien woman with luminous green eyes and ears that seemed to hear more than he could imagine, and perhaps discovering that laughter could exist even in the heart of chaos. The shuttle's engines hummed like a contented beast as it descended through the violet-tinged atmosphere of Velora, a neutral planet chosen for its Celyari ceremonial grounds, and more pragmatically, its lack of ongoing hostilities. Elias Varick gripped the console, pretending to understand the myriad of alien symbols and readouts flashing across the dashboard. Lysera sat beside him, her long ears twitching as she tapped at holographic controls with grace that made him feel every bit the human klutz he had been called. "You do realize," she said, voice lightly teasing, That your method of piloting could be classified as a hazard to interstellar travel. I'm a hazard to boredom at least, Elias replied, swerving slightly to avoid a rogue floating maintenance drone. Also, I prefer the term creative navigation. Lysera rolled her eyes but smiled, the corners of her luminous green eyes crinkling. There was an ease between them now, a rhythm built on shared survival, sarcastic commentary, and a growing trust that had emerged from chaos. That same trust had been tested countless times. In the plasma storms of Zephyria, in the zero-gravity corridors of derelict stations, and in the delicate art of dodging malfunctioning war machines. Elias had changed since those first frantic hours. His sarcasm remained, but it was tempered with a sharper focus, a quiet patience, and an understanding that survival sometimes meant listening rather than acting first. The ceremonial ground stretched before them, a blend of Celyari architecture and neutral planetary adaptation. Transparent domes rose like crystalline waves, reflecting Velora's twin suns, and the air thrummed faintly with resonant energy fields, designed to stabilize the floating structures. Aliens of many species mingled, holographic banners fluttering in zero-gravity currents. Elias took a deep breath, trying to appear casual while internally calculating the number of ways he could accidentally offend centuries of tradition. Lysera's hand brushed his, a subtle grounding touch. "Relax," she said softly, ears flicking with a hint of humor. "If anyone tries to kill you for breaching protocol, She paused, raising one eyebrow. "Well, I'll probably sigh and lecture you afterward. But it will be effective." "Comforting," Elias muttered, though a corner of his mouth twitched upward. The ceremony itself was an elegant chaos of ritual, technology, and tradition. Celyari elders projected holographic glyphs into the air, their shimmering forms weaving around the couple as Elias tried to follow instructions. Lysera guided him with gentle nudges and whispered explanations, her humor keeping him from panicking as the holograms swirled with alien precision. At one point he misstepped, accidentally kicking a levitating platform. Lysera hissed, ears twitching sharply, but Elias caught it just in time, quipping, "See, heroic improvisation in action." She gave him a mock glare, and he chuckled, secretly grateful for her patience. As they moved through the ritual, distant tremors shook the ground, remnants of Zephyria's war still rippling through the galaxy. A rogue patrol of war machines, remnants of the old conflict, descended upon the ceremonial grounds. Elias froze, heart sinking. Lysera's eyes narrowed, her long ears flattening slightly as she assessed the situation. "Stay behind me," she said, voice calm but firm. Elias realized with a jolt that the tables had turned. Here, in this delicate mix of tradition and diplomacy, he was no longer the sole protector. Lysera moved with precision and authority, disabling energy turrets and rerouting power to defensive fields. Elias followed, improvising where necessary, diverting debris, manually overriding drones, and using humor to maintain focus. "If I survive this, I'm definitely writing a memoir titled Adventures of a Clumsy Hero," he muttered. Lysera gave him a sharp glance. "Memoirs will wait. Survive first, preferably without accidentally detonating the ceremonial glyphs." Together they repelled the intruders. Their teamwork was seamless now, a combination of Elias' resourcefulness and Lysera's alien expertise. By the time the last rogue machine was disabled, the ceremonial grounds were intact, the guests impressed, and Elias both exhausted and exhilarated. Lysera's hand found his again, their fingers interlacing naturally. The final part of the ceremony was simple yet profound. Lysera extended her hand, long ears twitching slightly as she spoke words of Celyari tradition that Elias repeated awkwardly, earning soft chuckles from nearby observers. Holographic glyphs shimmered and solidified into a glowing symbol above them, a testament to their union, a bridge between species, and a promise that survival had given way to something more enduring. Elias looked at her, truly looked, and saw the woman who had laughed while hanging from debris, who had guided him through chaos, who had teased him with sharp wit and subtle warmth. He realized that his sarcasm had softened, his focus sharpened, and his heart, long buried under years of conflict, had found a rhythm that matched hers. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't expect any of this. And somehow, I can't imagine not having gone through it with you." Lysera's eyes glimmered with humor and something deeper, a reflection of the bond forged in fire and laughter. "Nor I," she replied. "Though I did expect a certain amount of clumsiness. That, at least, was predictable." They shared a quiet laugh, one that echoed softly through the crystalline domes, a sound both light and defiant against the backdrop of galactic turbulence. Around them, the Celyari and other species watched, some smiling, some nodding in approval, recognizing that this was more than ceremony. It was the survival of spirit, the triumph of connection, and the acknowledgement that even in the chaos of war, bonds could be forged that were stronger than any weapon. As the twin suns of Velora set, casting long violet shadows across the ceremonial grounds, Elias and Lysera stepped forward together. The galaxy outside would still have dangers, wars, and absurdities to navigate, but for the first time, Elias understood that survival was not merely about avoiding death. It was about finding someone whose humor, wit, and courage could challenge you, steady you, and walk beside you through every impossible circumstance. Lysera squeezed his hand gently, ears flicking in amusement. "So, Captain Varric, ready for whatever the galaxy throws at us next?" Elias grinned, a genuine, unguarded smile, and adjusted his jacket. "Bring it on, but if it involves zero-G puddles, I'm blaming you." She laughed, the sound like music woven with stars, and together they stepped forward into the uncertain expanse of the galaxy, bonded by survival, tempered by humor, and united by choice. The war was over for them, but their story, the story of trust, laughter, and interstellar love, was just beginning. Every challenge they had faced, every sarcastic remark and improvised maneuver, every near-death escape, had led to this. A union that was not dictated by duty alone, but by mutual respect, resilience, and the knowledge that life, even in the darkest corners of space, could be lightened with laughter, tempered with courage, and shared with someone who understood the beauty of improbable survival. Elias glanced at Lysera, her long ears flicking in the fading light, and thought, not for the first time, that perhaps surviving the galaxy wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about finding someone whose presence made the impossible bearable, whose humor made fear tolerable, and whose trust demanded that you rise to your best self. "And so," he whispered to himself, voice lost in the quiet hum of the ceremonial grounds, "we survive, and we laugh, and we live." Lysera leaned closer, whispering, "And we survive spectacularly, Captain. And yes, we laugh at your expense." Elias laughed, and for the first time in a long time, amidst alien suns and shattered worlds, he felt truly at home.